Hello out there, and today we are taking a look at a brand new design from Spyderco, and this one is called the Astute. And the Astute here is the newest release in the economy line, and it's the first brand new design that I think we've seen in that line for a good long while. You know, we had the Efficient a couple years ago and then some variations of that main design, but I think this is the first new thing we've seen on that economy line at the $42 price point like this is for a good amount of time. So it was very exciting, definitely one that I wanted to pick up and check out, especially since I have spoken somewhat recently about how, you know, Spyderco is just a little bit less accessible to people who are on a budget. Well, now they released this knife and I really want to see what it's all about. And I've got to tell you guys, it's arguably my favorite design from Spyderco in a long time, but it's definitely my favorite economy line Spyderco design, period. You know, the execution of it is pretty darn good too, and we're going to get into all those details. But when it just comes to the lines of the knife, this is easily my favorite economy line Spyderco that they've ever done. When you take a look at the Tenacious, and we'll just start with some size comparisons here. When you take a look at the Tenacious line, these are good looking knives. Like, by all means, don't get me wrong. I like the Tenacious, Persistence, Ambitious, all those. And I like the Efficient as well, but these ones are a little bit more like broad, a little bit more beater style, I think, when it comes to the design and the intention. And the Astute is the first knife that I've seen on the economy line in a long time. I think since like the Cat G10, the first one that just has a different kind of philosophy behind the build. And I really like that. Also, and the first thing that I thought about when I first saw this knife is I thought that this was a Ken Onion design. I thought for sure that somehow Ken Onion was partnering with Spyderco. I couldn't believe it, because if you take a look at this knife, and anyone who's a Kershaw historian and a Ken Onion fan from all those old discontinued models of his might look at this and see exactly what I saw. And I'm going to insert a picture of the Kershaw Splinter, which is a knife that I used to own. And I mean, the resemblance here between those two knives it's striking. So if you're an Onion fan and you're into that design, and Ken Onion used a similar handle shape on, you know, a few of his designs, there's definitely some similarities there that you'll enjoy. And, you know, seeing Spyderco make a design that looks so similar to a Ken Onion, it definitely works for me. It's something that I'm interested in. Talking a little bit more about the design, I am going to let you take a look at the pamphlet that it comes with. And if you want to get some more information about it and just pause, you know, it's interesting because they talk about how this design was actually based off of one that was submitted to them by a Hungarian architect. You can see all that, but there's no maker stamp on this. So that original design that this knife was based off of has obviously gone through a few different incarnations to get to where we are now. Just something that was curious and interesting. All right, so now let's get into more of the details. Let's get moving forward with some size comparisons, weight, and all the stuff that you need to know about the Astute. Okay, so here is the Kershaw Leak. So you can see that our cutting edge is going to be right around 3 inches, a little bit longer actually, so 3.1 I'll say. So it has a really nice nice overall length. Bring out the CRKT Caligo. Why not? It's been a while since I showed this one on the channel. It's a good comparison there. Bug out. I'm trying to think of what else. Well, we have to do the PM2, right? And here's the CRKT CEO, which doesn't really sit flat, so it's hard to do a comparison. But we'll be talking about this one relatively soon on the channel as well. Yeah, but this is just a good basic EDC kind of knife, you know, similar mini griptilian size. So yeah, it sort of is right there in the sweet spot, I think, for me as far as size goes and what I would like an EDC knife to be. So it is pretty much perfect there. When it comes to weight, we do not have any kind of like interior machining on the liners. So we do have those full stainless steel liners, but they're not particularly thick, and it runs us right at 2.7 ounces. So very agreeable. The mini grip's a little bit lighter. The Kershaw Leak with the liner lock is a little bit lighter, but like the frame lock one is heavier. So, you know, it's sort of right there in the wheelhouse. Anything under 3 ounces at this size is going to be fantastic. So yeah, the weight on this is very good. The blade, we are talking about 8CR13 MOV. That is the economy line steel. Spyderco, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, their 8CR has always been very good. They've always done a good job with it. I don't know how much better it is than anybody else's, let's be honest, but they've always done a pretty darn good job. Full flat grind on this, and so it's a very attractive blade, and it comes to a pretty thin behind the edge finish. I don't measure all that, I just do it by touch, and I can tell you I'm not going to have a problem with this thing slicing. A little bit of belly, good for piercing, a good overall type of blade. And honestly, even though, you know, I talk about the Tenacious being a little bit more, you know, just a little bit more of a beater kind of look, when you actually look at the shapes and the actual lines of the blades of these two knives, they're not all that dissimilar in terms of like the amount of belly and how straight the edge is and all that good stuff. Just a little thinner and a little bit shorter. But yeah, I think this is just a really good Spyderco-esque kind of blade shape, and big fan of it. Would I like a little bit of jimping? Absolutely. So as we move on back, let's get into the ergos here, and you'll see, you know, the way my hand fits on it, smaller to medium hand, a little bit of space, so a little bit larger hand wouldn't have any problems. This little ramp here would be good with jimping. Like I said, I think realistically this is going to be the position where I'll have the knife in my hand for most of the time, but you know, anytime you're cutting, you're moving around a lot anyway, and I'll always end up in a position like this for a lot of the finer detail stuff that I'm using anyway. But no sharpness, no issues with any of the machining on the edges, so they did a good job with all that stuff. The G10 is the standard Spyderco G10 that you would expect on the economy line. Maybe a little bit higher traction than the Tenacious. I don't have a regular one. I just have, you know, this one. It's pretty similar. I think a little bit coarser though on the Astute, which is a good thing. I like a more medium kind of G10, and that's what we have here. All right, we do have a liner lock. We'll get into the lockup and the action in just a bit. One of the small detrimental things about this knife that I just don't care for is I don't like the T6 pivot screw. Body screws, whatever, I'm used to them, that is what it is. The pivot screw, not a big fan of it. I have disassembled this knife, I have taken it apart, it was not an issue whatsoever. But that said, I still just prefer a T8, something a little more robust when it comes to that pivot. One more thing to say about that stuff though, since I did disassemble this knife, there wasn't a ton of Loctite on it. It came apart super easy. So some knives from Spyderco, you do not have that luxury. This one is an exception to that rule, so I really like that. Continuing to move on back, you can see here is our lanyard tube, not really in the way of anything, so that's a good thing. Open frame all the way through. And now let's talk about the next and last detrimental thing about this knife. It is the pocket clip. And the pocket clip for me is never really that big of a deal unless it really sucks. This one is pretty close to almost being a big deal because it sucks. There's no way around it. It's a crappy clip, and the thing that's the most frustrating about it is that there are a number of other clips that I have in my collection that I could replace it with that are better, i.e. this Spyderco clip from an old Cricket, I believe, and you see the screw holes line up there. It also lines up with the Benchmade clips, so that's pretty cool, right? Unfortunately, the screw size and the screw holes are too big to fit either of these clips. So you don't have the ability to swap them out. So even like an old Delica clip or the PM2 clip, which, I mean, the PM2 clip doesn't fit just because of the shape of the actual hole design, but the screws themselves are just too thick on this knife to allow for that, which is just inconvenient and stupid. So you're sort of stuck with this clip unless there is a secondary market clip that actually will fit this. I don't know. I don't know how many other Spyderco models have used this clip, but you know, it just was one of those things where I was excited because I was like, oh man, I've got a clip that'll carry deeper and just be a little bit better and not quite as long, and you know, and it didn't work, so whatever. But, okay guys, so one more quick thing I just noticed as far as the clip, and actually the other thing I didn't really like about the knife, the pivot, is that this being a 4-position pocket clip, it is reversible, you know, and movable to tip down. And this hole here, you know, if you were to go tip down, would line up with the pivot, and you'd be able to remove the pivot through the hole without removing the clip. Now, that is a convenient thing, and that is also most likely the reason why the pivot had to be that small. Unfortunately, me and most of us don't really care about that. So, you know, we have this these design decisions that are based off of conveniences that we don't really need. And so yeah, just sort of a bummer with the clip. And as you can see from the picture, like, it doesn't carry that badly. It's not that big of a deal, but I would prefer something a little bit different. Anyway, getting back to the rest of the knife. So let's talk about lockup and an action. So the lockup on this knife, liner lock, it is pretty solid and secure, zero issues there. That's one of the things I always like about Spyderco and their economy line. They've always been very dependable in that regard, so that is a good thing. And then the action is one of those things that really takes the cake for me with this knife. I'm enjoying the heck out of it. And you'll take a look and I'll sort of explain away why this knife is not perfectly centered. You can see it's off to the side. And I'll explain that when I talk about the action here. Opening hole and the detent, it's excellent. And it just goes to show how much a nice crisp detent and opening action can change your opinion on the way a knife is, because I mean it's just really good. It's really fun to flick open, right-handed, left-handed, spider flicking either side. It's really easy, really good and crisp. We're on these bronze washers, 2 bronze washers on each side, and that's really it. That's all that's going on inside there. And when I got the knife, explaining the centering now, when I got the knife, it was perfectly centered. Lockup was great, and there was no chance that it was going to be drop shutty or super smooth or any of that stuff. And so I kept adjusting it, messing with it, this and that, and took it apart, did some KPL knife pivot lube in there, and I got it to the point where it's pretty darn drop shutty, and the lockup is still perfect. You know, the only sacrifice, the compromise there was I lost a little bit of the centering. So yeah, whatever. I'll take it. I have no problem with it. Now that said, if you leave it the way it is from factory, like mine from factory, the opening was still spectacular. So, you know, that was just a preferential thing when it comes to, you know, the dropping action and me being able to loosen it just a little bit.
And now, 30 seconds of non-stop liner lock Spyderco Astute action. All right.
But yeah, so getting the action top notch was a big deal for me, so I did that, and honestly it just makes it, you know, even go to the next level when it comes to my overall enjoyment of the knife. But as it is, guys, this one, it just has so much going for it. It has so much going for it in terms of design. This is one that I definitely think Spyderco is going to take to the next level with other variations, and not necessarily like better steel or anything like that, but I would expect to see different kinds of G10 and different kind of colors and all that sort of thing the way they did with the other models, because design-wise, it is wonderful. And it's coming in at $42, which, you know, I've had these conversations about Spyderco and their pricing and them not being accessible. And the thing is, I would probably like it to be a few dollars cheaper, you know, just for the sake of drawing more people in. But I think the value at $42 for the design and the execution of it is great. It's really good. And when you look at some of the other things it's competing with, you know, some of the other knives that are in like the $40 range that, you know, I've reviewed recently, and some of the things that I've gotten, you know, and even if I like them or I enjoy them, this is definitely not a case where Spyderco is being outclassed in terms of execution or pricing. I mean, I think they're sort of right down the alley of where they should be with this, and this knife should sell very, very well. Definitely, I see influence from Ken Onion Designs, and that's another reason that really makes me love it. But I think this is going to see a ton of pocket time for me, and it's going to be a knife that I hold on to for a very, very long time. All right, guys, so that's my take on it. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, definitely let me know down below. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you get this knife, what you think, what your thoughts are. I'd appreciate hearing from you. All right, take care and have a good one.